welcome. Thank you all for coming today. The story on this exhibition really starts about 7 years ago when the American Anthropological Association decided that they wanted to make a public intervention into the discourse on race in the US specifically. And in the process of working out what that intervention would be, they hit upon the idea to do a museum exhibition, a traveling one, with the idea that this would be a very broad way to engage with all different kinds of audiences at a lot of different locations across the US. It was launched in 2007 at the Science Museum of Minnesota and has been traveling in 3 and/or 6 month increments to now 22 venues. So Natural History is the 22nd venue to host the exhibition. We're the first one with a national scope. The exhibition is intensely interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. It breaks down into 3 main content sections. After an introductory area, there's a section on science, which is about the science of human variation. There's a section on history, which starts in the 15th century with the first large-scale contacts between Europeans and non-Europeans. And then there's a section which American Anthropological Association and Science Museum of Minnesota call lived experience. So each of those 3 have one message per section. In the science section, the idea is that it's there to say that race, as we think of it, has no biological reality. That all the kinds of physical and biological things to which we ascribe racial meaning, either now or historically, that's all constructed. Human variation is real. The differences that we see are real, but there's nothing racial about them. The second section on history looks at the way that race has developed as an idea, specifically focusing on the notion that it's contingent. It has changed, it has evolved over time. What we have right now is not the way things have always been, and by extension, not necessarily the way that they need always be. And the lived experience section has the main message that race and racism are embedded in our daily lives and in our institutions. And a big element of that is privilege. Now, in each section, you'll see that there's a wide range of different approaches to developing the content and putting it in a package that visitors can rapidly interact with and understand. It's a very interactive exhibition. The science section in particular, which is unpacking a lot of reasonably complex stuff about human genetics and migration, has a lot of things that are almost games in their teaching style. Very interactive, very hands-on, very, very surprising in some ways. The history section, which has kind of uniquely for natural history, the few objects that are in this exhibition, is very timeline driven. It tells a few coherent stories about how race has developed as an idea, again, starting in the 15th century, but moving very rapidly into the US historical context specifically. So there's a section on the creation of race, there's a section on law and the intersection of law and race in American history, a section on the creation of whiteness, and a section on the creation of the intersection of race and science, I should say. In that section, we also have a number of different video monitors which play clips taken from the PBS documentary, Race, the Power of an Illusion. So you'll see objects, you'll see games, you'll see traditional museum panels, you'll see all kinds of different stuff. Finally, lived history, which has as much content as the other 2 sections combined, takes a very narrative approach. Since it's talking effectively about where we are right now, I feel that it succeeds in doing that by telling stories about how real individuals' lives are affected by race in health, in wealth, land ownership, school, and so on. Now, you'll see that the hall is very linear. Don't be mistaken though. I mean, there is a sort of a through argument that runs through it, but you can start at any place. And that's one of the things that this exhibition does really well from a design and interaction standpoint. Every single one of those stations that are up there serves as an entry point for visitors. I mean, in my experience as a former faculty member myself, you say race out loud in a room full of 50 people and everybody thinks of something different. That kind of lack of a shared vocabulary is really difficult when you know that you don't have a shared vocabulary, but with race we often don't really know that everybody has something different in their minds. By making the exhibition very modular, by finding all these different specific entry points, AAA and SMM have really worked to take that fragmentation and sort of turn it into a structure. Many doors lead into this conversation. And so that's in fact where our volunteers come in. So unlike, say, docents or tour guides, they're not there to be a quasi-expert. I mean, Lord knows we don't really need any more experts on race at this point. We certainly probably have as many as we need to have for the time being. Also, because the exhibition is so interactive and it is engaged in talking about a very complex subject, it's not really appropriate to have people in there sort of, spelling it out, here's how it is, because that, again, wouldn't really be appropriate. So we call them facilitators. They're trained in the content of the exhibition, they're trained in strategies for conversation and inquiry. Museum learning is very informal, but that's in fact one of its greatest strengths because it allows a lot of different ways to get into a learning moment. The volunteers are there to facilitate that, to help people find the entry points. The core is about, at the beginning of the show, I think we had, at the exhibition, we had about 75. We still have a strong core of about 60, 65. They're fantastic. I mean, if anything, it's like my 70 best students from my 10 years in higher ed, all in one group. They're from all over DC. Barbara can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to wager that they're probably the most diverse volunteer corps in any sense of that term that natural history has ever fielded. They have a few things in common. They're highly professionalized and highly educated. Many of them are educators. They're also very committed to this project, and that's something that gives them a lot of strength. So they work in there. We try to have folks in there every day at all times, open to close. Scheduling, often has other realities. But in the 4 months that we've had folks in there, the feedback that I've been getting as one of their primary points of contact on content is that visitors are overwhelmingly happy to find this here. People come back. People want to talk. People sometimes want to be left alone, but then they want to know that there's somebody there who they can bounce ideas off. And so at the broader scale, this pan-institutional collaboration that Barbara was talking about is a way of saying that the Smithsonian is committed to convening a conversation about this kind of topic. Now again, we don't have the answers. We're convening the conversation. Our job is to provide a space for folks from all walks to put the questions together themselves. We can help them with that. But answering those questions is the job of the individual visitor. And the Smithsonian, like the volunteers, is here to facilitate that.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are you going to be sorry to have it leave?
A few months ago, I was talking with Yolanda Moses, who is an anthropologist at UC Riverside, and she's the lead curator on this exhibition. And she said that the 20-odd prior venues have a term for it: race exhibition withdrawal.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, ask me again in January. The answer will probably be yes.
Be the one to answer.
Yeah, this is, as Barbara said, a unique, in many ways, a singular opportunity for this museum and for this community.
And I think what we're really talking about and trying to figure out is how do you take this energy of the volunteers and the facilitators and kind of move that into other areas of the museum.
Yeah, so I think that's
so it's not just a one-off.
Now that you've learned how to have a really different kind of exhibit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is no way that this exhibit can stay for another 6 months? No.
It's actually scheduled to be somewhere else, yeah.
Yes, we eked out an extra 6 days because, well, it was originally supposed to close on the 2nd, but the exhibit staff realized that staffing levels were such that too many people were going to be on vacation the week after New Year's, and so it's been extended till January 8th. So tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell whomever.
And those will continue on into time, right?
Yes.
The links.
Mm-hmm.
I know that AAA, American Anthropological, is really excited about how the reception of this has unfolded over the last few years. And they're looking at it as an example of, what could we do next? We could do something like this on some other topic next. So stay tuned on that, I guess.
Well, we have quite a few of our faculty who have been including this in their studies.
Good.
So who's coming tomorrow?
We've been addressing the issue of race for 2 years. This is actually the third.
Yes.
Looking at race in America, 21st century. And so I think a lot of our fellows have really been doing a lot of reading and visiting other areas of the Smithsonian with this in mind.
Good.
So, have any of you visited this exhibition before?
Yes, I know.
Oh, so 2 or 3 have already.
Good.
Any questions before we go?
I have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned, I think, that this is the original exhibit. Is that correct?
The original, I guess, copy is the right word.
Copy,
Yeah.
How have the other exhibits differed from this exhibit that we're going to see?
I guess in 2 ways. The full version of the exhibition is 5,000 square feet. It's typically set up in a square hall. So the arrangement you're going to see, as I mentioned before, is in a sort of a longer, narrower hall. That's actually 4,600 square feet. So there were, I think, a couple of elements, maybe just one major element that had to be dropped because it just couldn't fit into the hall. And so other venues, depending on their space, would be, might have that, might drop something else. The other thing that actually is unique to this exhibition here is that, so when AAA first launched this, Science Museum of Minnesota decided to incorporate the work of a set of student artists and curators from a school in St. Paul. And so in the lived experience section, there's a set of materials on race and education. And so they had 4 student lockers, each of which had an art installation inside it, responding to a set of prompts about what does race mean to you, how does race affect your life, and so on. We don't have that. Instead, we have 4 lockers created by students from DC schools. So that's one thing directly in the exhibition that other venues will not have. They may, steal the idea too, but failing that, the Science Museum of Minnesota is happy for the originals to be used.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
So what were some major things that you dropped from this exhibit?
I believe the only one that ended up not making it in is a station about race and health that specifically focuses on, I think it's the drug Bidil.
Right.
Am I remembering that right?
And so we still talk about it a little bit in the form of the blood pressure, right?
Sickle cell disease. There's something
That's
on
in there, yeah. But it was a more fleshed out kind of installation. I mean, it actually took a lot of physical space.
It looked
and
like
so
it was basically a mock-up of a pharmacist's counter.
So we don't have all that and just have a few of the components.
So there were several elements related to health. There's the sickle cell one, there's some panels about health disparities and a blood pressure machine and a set of reading cards that are about foot by a foot and a half that have content on them that visitors can read. Just pick it up, hold it like a newspaper.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Sometimes I think one of our curators in our coming to this Smithsonian one time told us that these kind of exhibits work better when there is a discussion space, like a discussion area where people sit down. Was that tried in
That was
any?
Michael Mason. Yes.
If we had a public-facing space in the museum near the exhibition that would allow for that, it would have been great. But we don't.
No, my question is, in any other place was that done?
Oh yes, in many other places, many other venues, yes, have done some kind of more structured interaction. There's a set of curriculum that the Science Museum of Minnesota makes available for venues, host venues, that includes kind of a fairly limited but useful set of practices for leading talking circles and that sort of thing. Sure.
So tell me a little bit more about what these facilitators are doing. They're,
Yeah.
how would my students use those facilitators?
Kind of in the same way that anyone would. So their stance in there is that they are there to help visitors interact with a complex topic a wide variety of content entry points into that. They're also there to act as sounding boards, to act as, not as counselors exactly, but to give people, visitors, the opportunity to talk to someone who represents the museum, is steeped in the exhibition, who can help them talk through whatever they might be thinking or feeling. So it could be, I mean, just to relate a few different stories. So we've had a lot of visitors who will be very powerfully moved by a lot of the things that are in this exhibition. My facilitators have told me numerous stories of visitors who were brought to tears. And when they see that, they just sort of do a sort of a simple approach. I mean, they're wearing vests and name tags, so it's clear that they work here at the museum. And at that moment, the idea is just to sort of check in and say, how are you doing? Can I help you? Do you need to talk about any of this? There's also, perhaps more often, the people who just want to be left alone to contemplate. And so the facilitators will approach almost anybody who comes in and say, what are you interested in? Welcome, my name's David. There's nothing that they want to talk about right then and there. Okay, just so you know, I'm here. Come find me if you need me. So they have, at a minimum, all the content of the exhibition to talk about, which is tremendous. All these different sort of topics and entry points. I have facilitators, I guess they've all tried to specialize in some way. Like I have a few who are really good with the youngest visitors who worked out some really cool stuff about using this floor world map to sort of talk about, oh, where do you come from? Where does your family come from? Show me on the map. I also have volunteers who work really well with student groups, high school groups, college groups. One of my best volunteers is a guy named Greg. He is a master sergeant in the US Army. He works at the Pentagon in their diversity and inclusion office. And he comes here after his weekly duties and puts in 2 4-hour shifts every month because he believes in it. So they're here to help visitors find things that they might be interested in, to help them frame questions, to help them understand what the exhibition is trying to do, and to the best of their ability, talk to visitors about all the different things they could learn. They're not here to change anybody's minds. They're not here to lecture. They're not here to be the expert. They're here to be facilitators.
Have you been surprised by anything that you've seen that other exhibit experiences? Like, was there something that's happened here at the Smithsonian with this exhibit that hasn't happened previously at those 22 other locations?
Yeah, every day, almost every day is the best day most of the other venues have. There's a picture that comes with, I think it's the basic press kit for the exhibition that shows, I think it might be opening day or fairly close to opening day in the inaugural stay of the exhibition at the Science Museum of Minnesota. And it's on MLK Day, probably 2007. The room is just full of people. Almost every day looks like that here. Now, one thing I would say is if you want to come back and kind of find a time to have it a little bit to yourself, get here right at 10. Because it usually takes 60 to 90 minutes for visitors to start to percolate up to the second floor. So up until about 11 or 11:30, you can kind of have most of the second floor of this museum, maybe not the Hope Diamond, but most of the second floor, certainly race, kind of to yourselves. I mean, there's a lot that really didn't surprise me in some ways. I mean, one of the things that we had a lot of conversations about was how is this going to be received now that it's at the Smithsonian? And I was convinced all along that we were going to have the same experience that, from what I'd heard, all the other venues had had, which was people were relieved to know that there was a place where they could go to learn about this, to talk about it in a safe, and to have safe and reasonably elevated intellectual, thoughtful conversations about it. And I think by and large, that's been borne out by everything that's been bounced back to me by staff, by volunteers, through the feedback systems that we've set up.
That's part of what we're trying to learn as well, is how to have safe conversations that are at a nice level, really.
Yeah.
And it's, so we're excited to see this.
Let's do it.